Hello and welcome to another episode of the BikeRadar News Podcast. I'm Jack Luke and today I'm joined by my wonderful colleague and the snappiest dresser on the BikeRadar team, Simon von Bromley. And in today's podcast, we'll be bringing you all the good stuff you come back for every week of the news podcast. Today, we'll be discussing a very juicy news story spotted by me. The news that Shimano is almost certainly developing a new pedal system called SPD SLR. I'm very smug about that one and Simon's going to grill me on that. There's also news of a new Specialized Aethos 5 years after the launch of the original one. And there's plenty to dissect there. We're also going to look over Pogačar's bike, World Championships winning bike. Sorry if that's a spoiler for you, a full week out from the race, but never mind. And we'll be discussing, of course, last week's most read story on BikeRadar.com. And then for a pretty mellow rant of the week, we're feeling very calm this week. Simon, how are you looking today, other than resplendent?
Yeah, fine, thanks. I mean, I was going to say, actually, when we first recorded this intro, you said I was your favourite colleague, and then when we re-recorded it, you took that out.
I left my emails on. Yeah, it's fine. I thought it was unfair.
But I just wanted to confirm for the record. No, I'm really good, thank you. Yeah. I mean, yeah, thanks very much. I do put a lot of thoughts into my. I mean, to be fair, Jack, you're quite a snappy dresser too. You're wearing a collared shirt today.
I'm wearing a collared
shirt. Is that a new shirt?
This is one that I just did a big vintage cull, and this one came from the depths of the wardrobe, and it's back out. Nice little vintage LLB number, thank you for noticing. And a haircut. Anyway, Simon, grill me.
Yes.
Ask me about Shimano pedals. I want to bask in the glory of my sleuthing.
So, Jack, what is Shimano SPD SLR?
Well, Simon wrote a really good story last week. This is a real love-in on Shimano Y1Rs R9300, the unreleased, probable, likely next generation of Shimano Y1Rs. We do it every, 4 years. I've been around so long, Simon. I remember doing this for at least 2 generations now. But we always do it. Like, what are we going to see with the next group set? And I thought, do my due diligence. Are there any references to R9300 online? Assuming that is probably what Y1Rs is going to be. Lo and behold, I landed on the Filipino distributor for Shimano, who had, in all likelihood, accidentally uploaded a whole bunch of product codes and product names to their website, which included R9300 pedals. I kind of looked at it at a glance and I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. Y1Rs R9300 confirms that it's going to be a new generation. But then I looked a bit closer and I was like, that's weird. The pedals are marked SPD SLR. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Shimano pedals are generally split into 2 camps. You have your SPD pedals, classic 2-bolt off-roady cleats, and then SPD SL, the road-specific ones, the big plastic cleats. SPD SLR, something totally new. Now, this is pure speculation at this point, but there are a few hints suggesting what form SPD SLR could take. So I went and looked at the name, did like a reverse search in Google, and landed on the US Trademark Office and found that Shimano had filed a trademark for SPD SLR earlier this year. And then Simon went and had a look, and whenever you file a trademark, you have to kind of, I suppose,
Describe it.
Yeah, define the categories that it's going to cover. And Simon noticed that within that is specifically referenced power meter pedals. Now that's really notable and gives us a strong indication that SPD SLR could be Shimano's long promised, or long rumoured, I suppose, power meter pedal system.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and that was what really kind of got me salivating, because a new set of, or a slightly upgraded set of Shimano SPD SL pedals. We've just seen the kind of SPD cleats get upgraded for the first time in a really long time, but it's only kind of like a minor update, and they retain backwards compatibility with existing SPD pedals. So SPD SLR, I mean, we were originally speculating it could just be maybe a lower stack height model for racers or something like that. But including a reference to pedals which contain bicycle power meter inside really got us excited, because I don't want to bash Shimano, but famously its power meter cranks are not the most well-regarded models out there on the market. And with the kind of growing popularity of power meter pedals, we're seeing excellent models from the likes of Favero, as well as Garmin. Obviously other brands are available as well, not making Shimano power meter pedals. There's very little reason now to go with a Shimano power meter crank when you can get those options from third-party manufacturers who integrate just as cleanly with your bike, are arguably more convenient and generally cost less. So we also have seen a patent for a wired Shimano power meter pedal in the past.
Yeah, that was 2014 it was filed, and 2018 it was granted. Another good piece from Simon von Bromley. Very early radar content, I might add. But yeah, we spotted that way back when. Technology's moved on a great deal, but it's still a strong indication that Shimano has at least seriously investigated power meter pedals in the past. And as Simon says, their sort of like recent history with power meters hasn't been great. There are other further hints that it could be power meters, so I think it's notable that the pedals only cover Ultegra and Dura-Ace level components. Now, Shimano has always regarded those as its racing level group sets, and has only ever offered power meters on Ultegra and Dura-Ace. Other brands like Stages, 4i, they will give you a 105 power meter equipped crankset.
And it's notable that Shimano SPD SL pedals go down to, Tiagra.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
You can get R540 pedals, which are cost, 20 quid or whatever. Yeah. Whereas, we won't expect, there are not listings for SPD SLR pedals down to that level.
Definitely. So yeah, there's strong indications that they are almost certainly a power meter pedal. And I'm going to put my money on the line. I reckon it's going to be power meter pedals.
Good job we don't get paid very much, eh?
Well, quite. However, I did have pause for thought with it just going all in and suggesting it's power meter pedals, because next to the listings there were also listings for new cleats marked as SPD SLR. Now, if Shimano's recent launch, what do they call it? The MTCL
001.
001, that's it. They're basically like new mountain bike cleats, which are designed to be a little bit easier to clip in and out of. But they are exactly the same as the old cleats. They work with the same shoes, same pedals. And I kind of assumed that if Shimano was going to release a new power meter pedal system, it would be in keeping with their overall philosophy to ensure that it's backwards compatible with old cleats. So to have SPD SLR cleats separately kind of suggests that there might be a new cleat design for the power meter pedals, or it might be a completely different direction altogether. It might not be power meter pedals in the first place. So at the more gentle end of the spectrum, perhaps we'll see something like those new mountain bike cleats where the SPD SL cleats are just designed to be a bit more walkable or maybe easier to clip in and out of. Again, that's pure speculation, but it wouldn't be that unusual. And the more speculative end, I think the R in SPD SLR will almost certainly stand for race. It always does with Shimano's kind of naming conventions. Now, Shimano pedals have among the lowest stack heights on the market. That is a slight, I don't want to say a bone of contention, but they're unusual as a brand in that they also include their cleats within their stack height. They actually are among the lowest. But as we've seen, reducing stack height is generally a desirable thing. And while it might be a very marginal change, there are only marginal differences we can make in bike tech these days. So even a small reduction there, maybe narrow Q factor, who knows? That could be something Shimano's chasing with a new SPD SLR design.
I would be thrilled if it was power meter pedals, to be honest. Yeah.
You love him.
I do like my job. I think they, power meter pedals, I'm believing it more and more. I think they will keep the I think the SPD SLR cleats will be subtly different in the same way that the new SPD cleats are, but they will be backwards compatible. I think one of the things that, say, Ekoi has run into with its pedal system, which has that massive pedal and the kind of weird cleat, is that you needed a whole new shoe.
That's a huge turn off.
And it's a huge turn off for asking people to change their shoes as well. You're asking people to spend another potentially £300, or if you've got a nice pair of shoes, just to switch pedals.
But just think about this. So actually now, let's say for example it was a new cleat design that required, again,
not a 3-bolt mounting.
Yeah, not a 3-bolt mounting. I guarantee the last generation of, mind you, they are quite old, the old S-Fires. But I bet you there would have been hints with shoes that have come onto the market.
Do you know what I mean? At the Ultegra level, asking someone to also buy new shoes is a problem, and it also means there's no upgradability for someone who, might have a kind of lower end shoe and then maybe wants to get a higher end pedal and group set. So I think they will stick with the 3-bolt kind of design, and that other patent that you unearthed, and which shows the shoe sole with a SPD SL cleat on it, which link in the description below, and we'll put that on screen now. That shows an SPD SL cleat. I can't really see any obvious differences, so I think they'll stick with that. Yeah, I think that the trademark reference to a pedal with a power meter inside is almost like a smoking gun. It could just be speculative. Maybe, as you say, Shimano is just covering themselves in case they want to do it. But it's kind of also, why would you put that in there if it wasn't something that you were at least considering?
If you are also a Shimano SPD SLR power meter truther, let us know what you think in the comments. Give us your speculation, what you'd like to see in a power meter pedal. I'm sure this is a topic we're going to revisit. As the months roll on and I look ever more for more Shimano leaks, my favourite pastime. On to our next topic of the day. After 5 years, Specialized has launched the Aethos 2. And since we're in such a speculative mood currently at BikeRadar, a couple of weeks ago I wrote a piece speculating about what the new Aethos could look like, noting it was a very long time since it was launched. So to make this all about me, let's go through each of my points and see what I got right. So to start off, one of my predictions, no surprise, the Aethos is lighter. The Aethos has always been pitched as Specialized lightweight purists cyclist bike. So to see them chase lower weight is no surprise. I couldn't imagine a world in which they were going to bring something to market and say, oh, by the way, this generation is actually heavier.
So the new bike is, I think, lighter overall. The kind of top build is claimed to weigh 5.98 kilos with a SRAM red axis build and the new set of Roval Alpinist CLX3 wheels, which launched a couple of days ago.
Carbon spokes?
With carbon spokes, yes, exactly. But I think the new frame is actually 10 grams heavier. So it's coming in at 595 grams claimed weight compared to 585 grams. And that...
Unrideable.
Unacceptable. And that, Jack, is because... it now features fully internal cable routing, just as you predicted.
Yeah, we predicted this one, and I think it will be very divisive. Like internal cable routing is not surprising, but I think it's safe to say it's maybe lost a bit of what made the Aethos interesting, gave it a bit of soul. Like it was very unusual to see a bike with external cable routing launched at the point, or semi-external cable routing, I should add. To go internal only, like. I don't know, it's just a bit of a shame. I think it delineated the bikes from others on the market and kind of strays a bit further from that, like, oh, it's a pure riding experience, it's an easy bike to live with, it's a rider's bike. I know internal routing is de facto now, but does it make a bike better? Not this kind of bike.
No, it makes it 10 grams heavier.
Well, worse then.
Yeah,
your old TCR, Simon.
It's not even old. This is the thing, but it is outdated because it doesn't have internal cable routing. But
Does it ruin the ride for you?
I don't think so at all. And actually, I prefer it because I want to be able to service my headset, potentially swap a stem if I want to, that sort of thing. I think it is a shame. I don't think it looked bad. I actually think it kind of played into its round tube, classic kind of aesthetic. Specialized told our colleague Ashley, who went on the kind of press launch, that basically they're doing it because it's what people want. That's the bikes that people are buying on the shop floor have internal cable routing, and I guess that's fair enough. If everyone out there loves internal cable routing, so be it. Maybe I'm just an old man.
I think we are just old man clinging on to the days of past. A small note on this, and another one we kind of predicted, was that the bike would adopt a UDH rear dropout. No surprise, like everyone's going UDH. SRAM and Specialized have a very close relationship. Unusual that the SL8 didn't get UDH, I thought. I know that was quite a few years ago now, but was it 2023?
Yeah, I think that would have been because, but if you think about how these bikes are developed, that probably would have been developed in a cycle before those derailleurs were perhaps presented to them.
That's true.
Like whenever we saw it, that design would have been finalised probably a couple of years out because obviously brands have to make decisions, create moulds, and do all of these, manufacture all of these things, and then do tests. And so I think it's probably, you have to consider the lead times for developing these things, I would say.
One we didn't predict, but our wonderful audience actually did, quite a few people pointing this out in the comments, was the taller head tube, a slightly more relaxed geometry overall.
Yeah, and so it's got a kind of taller head tube. I think it's 15 millimeters taller at the front end, slightly slacker head tube angle by about half a degree, longer chain stays. So again, the slacker head tube angle and those longer chain stays should just make it a little bit more stable, which is quite good. And clearance for up to 35 millimeter tyres, although I think it ships with 28 millimeter tyres because otherwise those, on paper weights would be much heavier.
Yeah, I always remember the last Amonda had 25s, which in 2020 whatever was, it was 2020. It was like such a throwback. And it's funny, isn't it, now that a few years on we're like 28s?
Yeah.
Oh my God, so old school.
Which is fine. I still ride 28s on my road bike, not a problem at all, especially if you've got a nice wheel set with a wide internal width. you know, I think these are kind of universally changes for the good. The old Aethos basically mirrored the Tarmac SL7 geometry, which was obviously very racy, quite long, quite low. You know, it's great for if you're a kind of pro racer, maybe not so good if you're an everyday rider. And obviously, since Specialized said the Aethos was specifically for everyday riders, not for racing, it did kind of seem a bit weird to have such a race-focused geometry. And I know it's something that friend of the BikeRadar podcast, BikeFit James, has kind of, you know, called out a couple of times over the years. So generally, I think that's a good change.
Definitely. Final point in this. It is Specialized, so of course it's more expensive. I'm being unkind, but like it's very moderately more expensive for the top end build. So looking at my very detailed notes, the S-Works Aethos 2 AXS, which is a SRAM red top end flashy AXS build with those new Alpinist wheels and all the rest of it, will cost you £11,500 or best part of $14,000. Now, if we compare that to the previous generation top-end bike, which also had SRAM red and also had Alpinist CLX wheels, it was £10,500 or $12,500. Actually, not quite as drastic if you consider, like, it's 5 years on, inflation, blah, blah, blah. It's still an absolutely eye-wateringly unbelievable amount of money, but it's not quite as drastic an increase as I would have thought. The frame sets are interesting, though, because the Aethos 1 frame sets were like £1,500 more expensive than when they launched last time I looked. So who knows what will go on with the frame set there, but yeah, it's special. What a surprise, it's more expensive. One thing they haven't included, which I predicted, out of pure wishful thinking more than anything else, is mudguard mounts, which is obviously nonsense, but actually, I don't think it is. I think a bike built for the love of riding, if you're spending $10,500 big ones, Simon, does your love of riding extend into the months of September through February?
No.
Okay. You just go on Zwift.
I just go on Zwift, yeah. No, I do know what you mean, and the fact that it has like kind of bigger clearances, you know,
and relaxed geometry.
And relaxed geometry. You could squeeze a mudguard in there, but I do think it goes against that kind of, you know, they'd have had to add 20 grams to it, wouldn't they? Which is unacceptable.
Unacceptable. 20 grams and 4 hidden eyelets. It would have made the bike unrideable. Anyway, that's the new Aethos. We have lots of coverage of that over on BikeRadar.com, including a first ride review from the aforementioned Ashley Quinlan. On to our next matter for the day. The news that Tadej Pogačar won a bike race on a very expensive fancy bike, and Simon was there to pick apart every single detail of that bike.
I wasn't there. I wasn't in Rwanda.
I would like to have sent you to Rwanda, but unfortunately,
the BikeRadar budget doesn't cover trips to
international travel. Yeah, quite that far. Anyway, talk us through the Y1Rs he rode to his stunning solo victory.
Yeah, it was a pretty stunning solo victory. He's a good bike rider, isn't he, this lad?
He really knows what he's doing.
One to watch, I reckon. Yeah, so
or not watch, because he actually makes races occasionally a bit boring.
So yeah, Pogačar rode the Colnago Y1Rs aero bike, although as he did kind of at the second half of the Tour de France, he rode a version that was stripped of its paint, although this one didn't have the Rainbow Champs World Champions stripes on it, because obviously, you know, for this race, he was then no longer on that day until he won it again. It wasn't the World Champion, so it didn't, you don't wear the rainbow bands during the road race. So yeah, a kind of lightweight, raw carbon version of the Colnago Y1Rs. You know, very, very lightweight bike. Colnago kind of claims it weighs just over 7 kilograms. It's
pretty good for full whack aero bike.
Yeah, which is around half a kilo lighter than the Y1S that we weighed at the Grand Depart in Lille. There'll be a YouTube video somewhere you can watch that if you want to see that full build.
Another good outfit from Simon in that one. Quite dad spec.
Yeah.
The cap, the shorts, the shoes. I don't know, you look like you're quite dad on holiday energy.
Yeah. But then, yeah, beyond that, it had the new NV-SES 4.5 Pro wheels, which we'll talk about in a moment because they have very lovely silver hubs and silver spokes. Shimano Dura Ace build, the 3D printed Physique saddle. And one notable change that I thought was quite interesting is that Pogačar was running the new Continental Archetype tyres rather than the slightly narrower 28C GP5000 TT TR tyres. Now, there could be a couple of reasons for this. You know, one, the course contained quite a few a sense of a cobbled climb, and so maybe he wanted a slightly wider tyre for better comfort and lower rolling resistance on that climb. But also, the kind of numbers are out for this tyre now from the likes of bicyclerollingresistance.com, and it is apparently very slightly faster than the TTTR, which is impressive.
That's practically riding itself at that point, surely.
Yeah, so that might have also had something to do with it as well, even though he'll have had to give up kind of 20, 30 grams of weight because they're a slightly bigger tyre, because the TTTRs only come in up to a 28. So yeah, I mean, all things considered, it's a pretty stock bike for him. We didn't see a new Dura-Ace group set, unfortunately.
After we published the SPD SLR story, I looked at like Van der Poel, Pogačar, basically any big riders who are on Shimano pedals. And I was like zooming in on Getty trying to see if I could spot anything. Sadly not.
Sadly not. But yeah, it was a very nice bike. As I kind of just said, I think the silver spokes and the silver hubs on those MV rims look absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely slap. I saw them at Sea Otter Europe. There was a pair of those wheels on the Envy stand for the distributor in Spain. And the thing was the first time I'd seen them in person. And like silver spokes and hubs on black, deep carbon rims just have a real je ne sais quoi.
Well, I've said it before, but they give off those kind of like early Team Sky head stinger vibes, and I really like them. I think obviously with the move to carbon spokes that a number of wheel manufacturers are doing now, we probably aren't going to see too many of them. But I definitely think it makes the wheels stand out and it makes them more interesting. So good job, Envy.
Very, very cool. Carbon spokes, I'm going to drop a little idea for something I'd like to do. Like, carbon spokes have sort of quietly become, I'm not going to say mainstream because they're super, super expensive still, but like where that would have been outlandish exotica, carbon spokes are now seen pretty commonly across wheels now, from brands from like Hunt all the way through to your Rovals of this world, Giant as well, or Kid X I should say. They sort of like quietly become mainstream.
Yeah, I think the innovation in that area has been that they mostly no longer need to be bonded to the hub and to the rim as they used to do, which obviously made a wheel untrueable. So if you had a problem, you had to send it back to the manufacturer and they'd have to basically completely redo that spoke. Now that we have these, I'm assuming the technology has moved on enough to allow you to have a carbon spoke where the ends can be bonded to a metal threaded portion, or whatever that can be.
They quite often like trumpet shape. They sort of like flange the carbon spoke itself, and then the nipple bites against that as it goes. It's all very cool.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. They're on a number of wheel sets. As you mentioned, a load there, and obviously Cadex has their carbon spoked wheel sets as well. There are still wheels made that old way. We were talking about Sign Cross's wheels the other day, where the carbon spokes literally are kind of like molded in one piece around the hub and then go into the rim in a really unique way. But those are the exception rather than the rule.
Final point in this before we go into our top red story on BikeRadar last week. There's a really good account on Instagram called Light Wheels Repair, and it's a chap who just repairs, I think in Spain, repairs carbon wheels, but with a speciality in lightweight wheels, which are one-piece bonded jobbies. It's so cool. It's so cool the work he does, like really detailed, quite like drastic repairs on these amazing wheels. Really good follow on Instagram. On to our most read story on BikeRadar.com last week, as chosen by your wonderful clicks. And that is the news that the Trump administration had barred Giant Bikes from importing its bikes to the US, citing forced labour allegations. Now, we did cover this in last week's podcast in fairly great detail. There is, of course, stories on BikeRadar.com, but the gist of it is that American custom officials were barring the import of bicycles manufactured in Taiwan following an investigation that found evidence of forced labour. The CBP said it would detain bicycles, bicycle parts and accessories manufactured in Taiwan effective immediately, and they said they found 5 indicators of forced labour throughout its investigation. Giant has since responded saying it's going to appeal against the ban, and we haven't really heard a great deal on it since then, but I think this is going to be a story which will continue to rumble on for some time. Obviously very serious allegations, and yeah, one we'll be keeping a close eye on and reporting on extensively. And if you do have anything to say on that subject, anything else you'd like to ask questions about, thoughts, feedback, questions for the Q&A, please send those to podcast@bikeradar.com. We're always very, very interested to hear what our wonderful audience have to say.
Well, one update that I did see on bicycleretailer.com,
right.
which is an excellent website. So Steve Frothingham published this on the 26th of September. Basically, Giant says that the Custom and Border Patrol, US Customs and Border Patrol, or CBP, actually never visited its factories or had any direct contact with the company before announcing that, and have apparently based their claims entirely on that journalist's investigation, which is interesting.
Yeah, so just to go back on that and give a bit of context, a journalist called Peter Bengston, I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, did a kind of bunch of investigations into this very subject, like cycling manufacturers and the sort of like labour market and how it works in East Asia. And he spoke to us, a really good story written by Stanley Portis, who said that the sort of debt bondage is really the norm in the cycling industry as opposed to the exception. That's really interesting. I hadn't read that bicycle retailer story. Sounds like something I should probably write about, Simon. Yeah, lots more to follow in this story. We will be covering it very closely. Stay tuned to BikeRadar.com. Now, finally, we're going to go into our rant of the week. And to be honest, we like to bring the most authentic, our authentic selves to the BikeRadar podcast, Simon. And every week there is normally something to rant and moan about. But to be honest, this week, I don't think there's a great deal in the petty world of our minds. There is clearly bad things going on in the cycling world, as we just mentioned with Giant. But I think for us, in our narrow view of tech and what's winding us up, we have almost run the well dry for this week. But I have no doubt there'll be something that will boil your clams.
Well, we were talking about this before the podcast, and you asked me whether there was anything the UCI had done recently that would made me feel ranty. And actually, I think
really? You said that they were in your good books.
They're in my good books now, because I'll give them a shout out, because I actually think one of the things that went announced with the whole the updates to its handlebar regulations and the aero helmet stuff that came out, was it last week?
It was last week.
They announced that they're going to have price caps for equipment at the Los Angeles Olympic Games in 2028. And I think that's absolutely a fantastic idea. Now, we don't know where those price caps will be set, but if they are low enough, then that will make a real difference in kind of the fairness of the sport, because
it's got absolutely outrageous in recent years, like hundreds and hundreds of £1,000s for individual bikes, let alone whole systems of helmets, skin suits, all the rest of it. And if you're a small nation trying to compete,
it's impossible.
It's impossible. And cycling, unfortunately, really is an arms race at that level of the sport.
I mean, we saw at the Road World Championships in the time trial, for example, there were riders from various nations who clearly couldn't even afford time trial bikes. They were on just bog standard road bikes and just competing in a way that they had absolutely no chance to show their full talent compared to someone who comes on a full TT setup. Yeah. That is outrageous. It's unfair. And the same thing will happen at the Olympics, where the likes of Team GB, Team Japan, Team America, all the kind of well-funded nations.
Team America.
Team USA. Yeah, Team America. Turn up on these bikes, which they have, the Team Japan bike, you do get the full bike, to be fair, but it was priced at €126,000.
Mamma mia.
Team GB were riding a 3D printed version, certain riders, not all of them I would imagine, a 3D printed version of the Hope HBT Paris, which they priced for a frame set at about €60,000. Team Australia were riding black ink wheels, which cost around €18,000 for a front and rear disc. Team Italy were riding Pinarello Most handlebars in the Team Pursuit, which were about €26,000 for a set.
Soft power, it must be worth quite a lot. The soft power of the Olympics is clearly worth a lot of clout if you're willing to spend that much as a nation.
And we can debate whether these things actually cost that much to develop. I think there's a reasonable argument to say that they probably do cost a lot of money to develop, because they have very, very limited commercial viability. And
they're produced in minuscule numbers.
Exactly, like the Hope 3D printed Hope HBT, for example, is literally custom made to order. So it will cost a lot of money to make.
And as the son of a cabinet maker, I can tell you one of my dad's tables costs a lot more than an IKEA table.
Yeah, and for good reason.
For good reason. It takes bloody ages.
But having these things available, you know, the UCI rules as they exist at the moment basically says that these things have to be commercially available. And the whole reason we have access to these prices is because in a kind of act of transparency, the UCI said that everyone had to put their pricing details, their contact details, you know, you had to register equipment and make all of this stuff publicly available at a certain point before the Olympics so that you couldn't just come in with something that no one else had an opportunity to see or purchase if they wanted to. So I think that's a really laudable thing. And if these price caps are set at a level that really does bring down the price of equipment so that, you know, smaller nations who don't have these massive budgets have a genuine chance of competing on a more level playing field, I think that's generally a really good thing. Now, there were a few comments from people saying, oh, I'd much rather just see everyone on exactly the same bike. It should be all about the athlete and not the bike. But for me, you know, obviously it's completely subjective, but I wouldn't want to see that. But I think that would be a little bit less interesting. I like the fact that, you know, different nations come up with different solutions to things. You know, when we saw the Team USA ride a Canyon sort of Speedmax track, and Canyon were very clear that they said they tried the kind of wide fork thing and they don't think it's the right solution, and that's why they went for a narrow fork with wide seat stays. And you know, you see all these various different solutions from different teams around the world. So I do like the fact that they are able to, you know, use the technological aspects to improve their performance. However, it shouldn't be to the extent where they can effectively price out smaller nations from medals.
There we go. Look at that. An organic rant. Very authentic, I might add, as well. Thank you very much for listening to the BikeRadar podcast, or if you're on YouTube, for watching. We really appreciate all of your kind comments and feedback. We really enjoyed putting these together. And next week it will be Simon and I again, bringing you the very best of BikeRadar's tech news. Although, oh no, it'll be fine. It's my birthday next week, but I'm actually working. Happy birthday to me. Anyway, no, I will be working next Thursday, so it will be us too. Yeah, if you have any thoughts, questions, feedback, comments, please send us to bikeradar.com or leave a comment on the YouTube video. In the meantime, we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you for listening.